Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 12th of September of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to start with Zaporizhzhia direction, and the most interesting part is that according to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, that as a result of fierce clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost 35 soldiers, 10 armored vehicles and 5 artillery systems. As you can see, according to the numbers, we see that the level of losses of the armed forces of Ukraine, when talking about the manpower, of course, is the lowest since the beginning of Ukrainian greatest counter-offensive operation that was launched on the 4th of June. Of course, when talking about armored vehicles, the losses are very heavy, but let's discuss in details and let's start step by step. And first we're going to talk about the first Zaporizhzhia area, about the western flank, about the settlements like Kupiansk and Stepova. The Russians intensified their actions in this direction. And the most important update that you need to know about is that the Russians have redeployed in this direction probably one of the most experienced and one of the most powerful, one of the most well-equipped squad of drone operators, Sudoplatov. So this recently, or this squad used to be located on the Donetsk direction, but for some reason the Russians took a decision to redeploy them. And as soon as they did that, this squad started publishing videos of strikes against the Ukrainian positions in Stepova. Also, there was another strike also with a drone in the vicinity in the settlement by the name of Kupiansk. This attack was made by another squad of operators of FPV drones, but anyway. If we increase the number of updates, let's say from the beginning of September, we're going to see that the Russians are pretty concentrated. In Kupiansk, at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 FPV drone strikes took place just since the beginning, geolocated strikes of the September, 1 artillery strike in the settlement. The Russians were bombing with artillery systems the settlements like Lapkova, Tree Lines and Petykhatki, and currently the Russians also are focused in Stepova. So this is very important, and we see complete absence of Ukrainian counter-artillery or counter-drone duels, probably, and there is a very high chances that the Russians, that anyway the battle for Robotyne and Ukraine counter-offensive operation is about to be finished, like 10 days, 20 days or 30 days, and this operation will be finished. And the Russians need to be ready to counterattack. And maybe currently where they become witnesses of the beginning of the Russian counter-offensive operation that might take place from Kupiansk in direction of Stepnogorsk, or from Zherebyanki in direction of Lapkova, Stepova, Mali, Sherbaki, Pavlovka, Novoyakovlivka. And this attack, the main purpose of this attack is to stretch the Ukrainian forces and to establish fire control over the main supply roads that goes in direction of Orekhov. Very important and very interesting focus of the Russians in this direction. We'll follow this situation, of course. Now we are moving to Bradley Square, to Orekhov front line, and we got a lot of updates and a significant number of updates, to tell the truth. First of all, we need to pay attention to the main Ukrainian supply road. The Ukrainians continue using the same roads to move their forces to the fields between Verbove and Robotyne, and the Ukrainians still haven't managed to maintain their flanks, and that's why the Russians attack the Ukrainians almost every single day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. On this video we can see how the Ukrainians have just landed, and as soon as they landed, the Russians destroyed their armored vehicle. So just a second, sometimes the Ukrainians don't have even time to complete the unpacking of their armored vehicle, and the Russians destroyed. For example, on this video we see the same picture. A personal carrier arrived, the Ukrainians left, and in a second the personal carrier was destroyed. Probably there is a very high chance that not every single Ukrainian managed to leave that personal carrier. Significant losses, the Russians are bombing and attacking, and the Ukrainians can't do anything with this. And the main problem and the main reason of that is that the Russians have the low range and middle range artillery superiority. Just for the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians lost another M777 howitzer, another Paladin, another D30 howitzer, another Stab-B, and so on. The only thing that the Ukrainians can do is to attack the Russians with HIMARS. For example, on this video, we see another video how the Ukrainians discovered the Russian positions, the Russian artillery system, and as a result of strike, the Ukrainians destroyed Russian artillery system with HIMARS missile. One more time, long range distance. And maybe this is not the type of war when you can win using like effectively and having the long range superiority. Yes, of course, the enemy can't get your systems, your HIMARS systems, but with them you're too slow and you're not flexible. You need to know for sure that the target is going to be static, that the target is not going to change its position, and only this is the only way how can you use HIMARS and long range artillery. When talking about the low range and middle range, it doesn't matter for you whether the target moves or stands. You can target always because the distance is very short, and if the distance is short, then you need less time to attack and so on. But this is not the last things about this territory. Of course, the Ukrainians continue accumulation of their forces in the southern salient, and we got another details, more videos how the Russians discovered another Ukrainian platoon of forces who were moving along these ways very freely. They didn't expect nothing, and at some point the Russians started bombing and shelling them with artillery systems. Very interesting details, because currently, according to these videos we just discussed, the Ukrainians have accumulated at least two attack fists. The first one on the south, and mainly for these purposes, and the Ukrainians are using the forces of 46 Brigade, this Skala battalion, the forces of 46 Brigade, this is 46 Air Mobile Brigade, and this is the brigade that probably is going to be the main attack, the main brigade to attack further in the direction of Очеретовate. When talking about the central part, this way where we just seen a lot of videos of destroyed Ukrainian forces, the Ukrainians are using the forces of 82nd Brigade, Air Assault Brigade. We had a lot of videos with the participation of this brigade, and today we got a very interesting video that took place in the vicinity of Verbove. This morning, the Ukrainians, to be more precise, this one, 82nd Brigade, this one you see this like a hawk on the shield, published the video how they discovered the Russian positions, Russian soldiers, and after that the Ukrainians attacked Russian soldiers, a Russian soldier with FPV drone, and this video with this situation we can find in this area. We will not watch the video till the end. And during the previous video, this territory was at least under Russian control because of that geolocation with the Russian soldier. But later during the day, the Russians published at least two videos. The first video was published by Sudoplatov. You see these guys one more time, Sudoplatov. This drone squad used to be located on Donetsk direction, and when talking about South Orechov, we had a lot of videos from Bobry FPV drone operators, and this is new brigade that was very experienced, removed in redeployed in this area. And basically, according to this video, the Russians discovered the Ukrainian positions on the trenches, and the Russians bombed the Ukrainians with FPV drones and so on. And this territory was split in two parts: the western part under the 82nd Brigade and the eastern part under the Russian forces. But today, right before I start making this video, we got another video how the Russians were attacking and bombing the Ukrainian trenches on the west of Verbove, which confirms that as a result of offensive operation, as a result of attack of 82nd Brigade, the Russians were forced to step back, and currently there are just positions of the Russians in the settlement by the name of Verbove, and the fields is under complete Ukrainian control. And I expect that 82nd Air Assault Brigade within the next few hours, not even days, will start their first attempt to attack Verbove, because there are no more barriers, no more tree lines in front of this brigade when talking about attacking in direction of Verbove. Furthermore, some Russian sources reported that the Ukrainians have redeployed to the south in direction of Robotyne. So in Robotyne direction, the forces of 65th Brigade, this is the 65th Brigade. The 65th Brigade was the first brigade that took part in the first waves of attack in direction of Robotyne during the June, when they had significant losses and lost their combat capabilities. Then they were removed from the combat line for fulfilling and so on. And also the sources are saying that Ukrainians have redeployed in this direction the forces of 71st Jaeger Brigade. The 71st Jaeger Brigade was traveled all over the Ukraine. So anyway, currently, as we see, the Ukrainians have created at least 3 attack fists. the 65th Mechanized and 71st Jaeger Brigade is going to attack in direction of Novoprokopovka, trying to establish control over the northern part of the settlement and the central part of the settlement. The forces of 46th Air Mobile Brigade will try to attack in direction of Acheretovata, trying to develop their foothold and their offensive operation to the south, like trying to get operational square. And the forces of 82nd Brigade within the next probably hours will start storming and attacking the Russian positions in Verbove. And there are still some reserves of 116th Brigade, 118th, 47th, and so on. Probably this brigade will be removed from the combat line because during the previous battles they lost its combat capabilities as well for fulfilling, but as I believe this process is about to be finished and the Ukrainians will get some reserves. So the clashes is going to be very difficult within the next few weeks. And I'll remind you that on the 20th of September there's going to be another Rammstein meeting, and Zelensky need as much as possible to show some progress on the ground before that meeting. And it's already 12th, so less than a week, less than 10 days, and now he will try his best but to show results. And there are going to be a lot of losses, more clashes, more killed soldiers, and so on in this area. This is not a FPV drone operator squad Babry. This one there operates closer to Robotyne-Verbove, and Sudoplatov operates all over the combat line in Zaporizhzhia direction. Two the most important and powerful operators of drones currently located in Zaporizhzhia area. That means that the final battle is about to begin. Now we're moving to the Vremivka tactical bridgehead. Probably the Ukrainians were defeated in the vicinity of Novomaiorske. Today we continue receiving more updates, more videos from this direction, how the Ukrainian forces basically were destroyed as a result of another attempt, as a result of failed attempt to attack the Russian positions. During the day we got a lot of videos how the Ukrainians were using like MRAP, Max Pro to redeploy their forces closer to the combat line, but sometimes there are cases when the Ukrainians don't have even possibility to land their troops and to unpack their armored vehicles, and basically they are destroyed during the process of movement. The Russians so heavy control of Russian forces of supply roads. On this video you see almost the same. The Ukrainians have just landed and unpacked their carriers, and the Russians destroy the armored vehicle within a few seconds. So very difficult situation for the Ukrainians, but probably that they got some benefits. They managed to achieve some goals, the Ukrainians, as a result of those attacks. And probably the most important thing that Ukrainians managed to achieve is that Ukrainians managed to discover the Russian supply roads, the Russian artillery positions, the Russian fire position. And during the previous days, during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians were trying to work all those positions out, trying to attack to get the Russian artillery systems and so on. And they published a series of videos of attacks with FPV drones. But we haven't received even a single geolocated confirmation of the usage of Ukrainian artillery systems in this direction. From the other side, the Russians published another video how the Ukrainians were using the same road, the same destination, the same way of attack, the same settlements, the same time. Probably the Ukrainians were trying to create another convoy, another column to attack. The Russians knew everything, the Russians tracked everything, and at some certain point of time when they discovered like the maximum value of this convoy, the Russians started bombing and shelling the Ukrainians, and probably the entire attack of Ukrainian forces was collapsed without not being even started. Now we're moving to Donetsk direction, and we got some details from Oputne. The Russian sources published the video. We discussed that some sources are saying that Ukrainians have entered the settlement and so on, and the Russians took a decision to provide some evidence, some geolocation confirmation, and they published the video from the western part of Oputne, from this cloud, that this territory, this cloud, is under complete Russian control. We haven't received even a single confirmation, let's say, from this territory. So I will not change the color of the settlement, telling that this area is under Ukraine control, but we will not remove the Ukrainian soldiers from the settlement, at least from the vicinity of the settlement, because there are still very high chances that Ukrainians manage to dig in deeper, at least at some point, at some part of the settlement. When talking about the next direction, when talking about this direction, the Ukrainian losses has been reduced a little bit, and the Ukraine lost 225 soldiers in comparison with the previous days. The level of losses is, of course, a little bit lower in comparison with the most important days of July or August. Very interesting updates are coming from Andriivka area, from the settlement, and from Klishchiivka as well. Today the Ukrainians published a lot of videos, a lot of geolocated videos, how the Ukrainian soldiers were making videos from the settlement, how the Ukrainians were making videos in the vicinity of the church that located, and one of the Ukrainian soldiers was very surprised when he saw a Wagner flag about one of the buildings in Klishchiivka. Another soldier published the video from the central part, the trenches, the Ukrainian positions. He made a video, he made the comments, and then he sent some I don't know, words to his relatives, he sends the video and so on. So these videos confirm that Ukrainians have 100% control over the central part. We haven't received nothing from this area, so that's why I still keep this small street of Klishchiivka under Russian control, because we haven't received neither artillery strikes, bombings or clashes inside of this part of Klishchiivka. Also, the Russians today published the video how they were attacking Klishchiivka using the helicopters Ka-52 and Mi-8. On this video we see how the Russians helicopters attacked the central part of Klishchiivka, then they launched some kind of air defense protection, and after that they left the territory. When talking about Andriivka and for example the pro-Ukrainian part of Twitter and Telegram have already captured the settlement around 7 or 8 days ago, but today the Ukrainian sources published another video how the Ukrainian forces were bombing and shelling the settlement by the name of Andriivka, which confirms that the Russians still control the settlement, that the Russians still saved their presence there. And the main reason of that is that during the previous days, during the period of time when Andriivka was under complete Russian control, when all the settlements around Andriivka were also under Russian control, they managed to create a bunker, they managed to create a very rich developed network of shelters, and the most important, the Russians created the tunnel that leads probably up to Adradovka. So that's why the Russians don't have possibility to send their forces from one settlement to another, because these railways are located on the hill, and there are a lot of underground tunnels below the hills, and we had a lot of videos when the Russians were trying to bypass from one side of the railways to another, and they were using like underground facilities. And this is the reason why the Ukrainians can't attack, and the Ukrainians are forced to stand on the pinchers from the northern and the southern one without possibility to storm the Russians, because basically Andriivka is encircled. It's a cauldron or something like this, with one possibility to supply and support these forces using the underground tunnels. And probably the Russians who are located in Andriivka are heroes, because they are completely encircled. There is no way to connect. There is no connection with the settlement on the surface. They are always under very heavy fire from the Ukrainian side, using the cluster rounds and so on. And they're still keep the settlement. And meanwhile, the Russians, while the Ukrainians have locations on the northern and the southern pinchers, attack the Ukrainians with all artillery systems. They attack them very heavy, not just with artillery systems, but also with drones. Today, another video we got from Sudoplatov, probably some forces, some squads the Russians left there, and on this video we see how Sudoplatov struck and destroyed another Ukrainian positions along the railways. The Ukrainians from their side published the video how they were bombing and attacking the Russians using the cluster rounds and using the just regular artillery systems, using FPV drones and so on. So the Ukrainians tried to have some counter-artillery duels, but yet they haven't managed to establish entire control over this foothold. Very interesting video we got from Lugansk. Another episode of effective usage of HIMARS, another like episode of complete Ukrainian long-range superiority on the field. On this video we see how the Russians concentrated and accumulated some forces in the vicinity of Lugovskoye, and after like few seconds there was a very powerful missile strike, and as a result of that strike entire Russian squad was destroyed with the building and with the ammo depot. So significant losses, another mistake. And this is not the first case. For example, if we increase the number of updates, we see that on the 1st of September, like 10 days ago, 12 days ago, the Ukrainians made another attack, and as a result of the previous attack they destroyed the Russian like ammo depot, the operation, like the warehouse, lots of trucks, supply support trucks, and so on. So somebody is still continue doing mistakes from the Russian side, and it's obviously, as you can see. When talking about the northern flank, no movements, no changes. The Russians continue publishing the video how they were attacking and bombing the Ukrainian positions in Ivanovsk using the artillery rounds, and as a result of those strikes, we see like full control over the settlement. The Ukrainians don't have possibilities to redeploy their forces to move from one side to another. These areas under complete control. Probably the only way they have is to use infantry, but of course this is not the case when talking about large scale offensives and large scale like operations. When talking about Kremenaya and Siversk area, today we got another video of another usage of HIMARS on the long range distance. As a result of attack, another Russian ammo depot was destroyed, and this is not the first case from this direction. A few days ago, in the beginning of September, the Ukrainians have already attacked this area, and on this video we see another like usage of HIMARS missiles and another very heavy explosion. So twice in a month the Ukrainians attacked, and the Russians couldn't do anything with this. When talking about the combat line, the Russians continue storming and attacking the Ukrainians in Kremenaya forest, continue bombing and shelling the Ukrainian shelters and trenches inside of the forest. The total losses of the Ukrainians on the Kupiansk-Liman front line were around 70 soldiers and 8 armored vehicles. As you can see, the level is probably the lowest, and the Russians continue bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions in Kislovka, Stepovo, Novoselovka, with attempt to establish control over these two strongholds, because these are the like heart of Kupiansk direction is located not in Sinkovka or Kupiansk itself. The heart of operation for Kupiansk is located in the settlements like Kislovka and Kotlarovka, and if the Russians somehow are able to establish control or penetrate Ukraine's defense belt in this area, then nothing will be able to stop the Russians to get Oskol River like along this line. Nobody will be able to stop them. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your like, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.